Chapter 1. The Lie That Walks. It begins with the sound of boots where no army should be. Not the thunder of a legion advance. Not the roar of drop pods or the litany of vox prayers. Only footsteps measured, patient, echoing through corridors already declared secure. By the time the alarm is raised, it is already too late. The Alpha Legion does not arrive like war. It arrives like doubt. In the dying years of the Great Crusade, when the Imperium believed itself ascendant, when compliance was measured in conquered stars and broken empires, the Alpha Legion stood apart. They wore the same ceramite as their brothers. They spoke the same oaths. They fought beneath the same banners of unity. And yet, even then, something was wrong. They were too quiet, too patient, too interested in what came after victory. Other legions broke worlds to make examples. The Alpha Legion broke systems of thought. They studied cultures before destroying them. They mapped loyalties. They cataloged fears. By the time their bolters fired, resistance had already rotted from within. Victory was never the point. Control was. At their head stood Alpharius, at least. That was the name recorded. The first and the last pre-march to be found. Or perhaps neither. For even in official Imperial records, Alpharius is a contradiction given flesh. A pre-march whose height, features, and even voice changed depending on the account. A pre-march who encouraged his sons to look like him, to be him. I am Alpharius. The phrase was not a boast. It was a weapon. In the Alpha Legion, identity was the first casualty. Rank dissolved into utility. Names became masks. Orders flowed not downward, but sideways, branching into cells that neither knew nor needed to know the full design. Each warrior carried only fragments of truth, enough to act, never enough to betray the whole. And so the Legion learned to fight wars no one else could even perceive. They infiltrated before invasion fleets translated into real space. They rewrote command structures, replaced officers, seeded false intelligence, and turned allies into liabilities. By the time the Imperium declared war, the outcome was already decided, often without a single Alpha Legionnaire ever revealing himself. The galaxy learned to fear open rebellion. The Alpha Legion mastered the Invisible One. Yet for all their secrecy, they were loyal, or so the record claims. During the Great Crusade, they shattered Xeno's empires not through annihilation, but through orchestration, pitting rivals against one another, collapsing economies, triggering civil wars that burned worlds from the inside out. Compliance achieved without spectacle, without witnesses. The Emperor noticed. He always does. Unlike other legions, the Alpha Legion was not praised publicly. There were no triumphs paraded across Terra, no monuments raised. Their rewards were silence and continued use. They were given tasks others could not be trusted with. Wars that required subtlety. Enemies that could not be crushed outright. They became the Imperium's unseen hand. And unseen hands are rarely clean. When Horus fell, when the heresy split the galaxy and brother turned upon brother, the Alpha Legion did what it had always done. It watched. It listened. And then, it chose a path no one has ever truly understood. Officially, the Alpha Legion turned traitor. They fought at Istvan. They sabotaged Loyalist supply lines. They murdered commanders and shattered defenses from within. Their Hydra sigil became synonymous with betrayal, with plans within plans, with a legion that could never be trusted by enemy or ally alike. But the truth fractures here, because for every record that names them traitors, there is another, sealed, corrupted, half erased. That suggests something else entirely. That the Alpha Legion did not fall. That it volunteered. Some accounts whisper of a meeting before the heresy truly ignited. Of Alpharius or Omegon, standing before the Emperor's chosen agents, hearing a prophecy of the galaxy's end. A future where Horus' victory led to humanity's extinction, and where Horus' defeat led to something worse. Endless war. Eternal decay. A slow, grinding death stretched across millennia. The only way to save humanity, the lie claims, was to lose, to ensure Horus would fall, but not too quickly, to poison chaos from within, to guide the war toward a narrow, brutal equilibrium. If that was the mission, then the Alpha Legion did not betray the Imperium. It became its darkest shield. After the heresy, when the Traitor Legions fled into the Eye of Terror, the Alpha Legion did not behave like the others. They did not revel in demons. They did not build empires in the warp. They fractured deliberately into autonomous warbands, cells operating across Imperial space, some fighting the Imperium, others secretly aiding it, sabotaging chaos incursions, destroying cults before they could bloom, feeding false victories to the enemy, and sometimes slaughtering loyal worlds without mercy. Because a lie must be convincing. The Imperium, blind and bleeding, labeled them heretics. The Inquisition hunted them. Loyalist chapters swore oaths of annihilation. And still the Alpha Legion endured, never whole, never gone. Hydra heads cut away, only to multiply. So what are they? Traitors who believe themselves saviors? Loyalists who accepted damnation as the price of victory? Or something worse, a legion so committed to its own vision that it no longer remembers which side it serves? Perhaps that is the point. The Alpha Legion does not want to be understood. Understanding creates certainty. Certainty creates patterns, and patterns can be exploited. Confusion is safer. Fear is cleaner. Doubt is eternal. Even now, in the dark age of the Imperium, reports surface of wars ended before they begin, of chaos cults collapsing overnight, of Imperial crusades sabotaged from within by operatives who leave behind only a Hydra sigil and a trail of unanswered questions. Sometimes the Alpha Legion fights for chaos. Sometimes it destroys chaos. Sometimes it turns its blades on both. And sometimes it does nothing at all. Watching, waiting, adjusting the lie. The galaxy burns, not because the Alpha Legion failed, but because perhaps this is exactly what it intended. Or perhaps not. That is the cruelty of the Hydra. Truth dies first, and in its place, something far more dangerous survives. Silence. Chapter 2. Many heads, one shadow. The Hydra never strikes alone. It coils first, patient, unseen, around the throat of its prey. Pressure builds slowly, almost gently. By the time the victim realizes it cannot breathe, the heads have already chosen where to bite. The Alpha Legion was never meant to be singular. Other legions were forged as blunt instruments, massed ranks, clear hierarchies, identifiable champions whose deaths could turn the tide of war. The Alpha Legion rejected this shape from the beginning. It learned early that a sword can be broken. A shadow cannot. From its earliest days, the Legion fractured itself by design. Companies subdivided into cells. Cells split again. Command chains dissolved into overlapping redundancies, where no single failure could doom the whole. Orders were distributed incomplete, each warrior holding only what he needed to act, never enough to reveal the greater design. This was not chaos. It was discipline refined to invisibility. Within the Alpha Legion, identity was not erased, it was weaponized. Faces were interchangeable, voices trained to match one another, armor markings standardized to the point of deliberate confusion. Even gene augmentation protocols were adjusted so that legionaries resembled their pre-march in height and bearing, not to honor him, but to replace him. An Alpha Legionnaire could give orders and be obeyed without question. Rank mattered less than certainty. If a warrior spoke with confidence, if his information aligned with the mission parameters, then he was authority. And if he died, the plan continued. This philosophy reshaped how the Legion fought. Traditional legions sought decisive engagements. Alpha Legion wars began months, sometimes years, before the first bolter round was fired. They studied trade routes, cultural fractures, political rivalries. They identified which officials could be turned, which generals could be discredited, which populations could be nudged into rebellion with the smallest push. A city did not need to be destroyed if it could be convinced to destroy itself. When the Alpha Legion finally revealed its presence, it was never as an army. It appeared as rumors, as malfunctioning defenses, as commanders giving contradictory orders. By the time the enemy understood who they were fighting, the battle was already lost. And then the Hydra struck. Multiple vectors, simultaneous decapitations, no central target, no single victory point. The enemy's command structure collapsed under its own weight, strangled by 1,000 small failures that no one could trace back to a single cause. The brilliance of the Alpha Legion lay not in its strength, but in its restraint. They did not seek annihilation unless it served the long design. A defeated enemy could be more useful than a dead one. A humiliated governor might spread instability for decades. A broken chapter could sow distrust among its allies long after the Legion had vanished. This was war as erosion, and it demanded something most warriors could not endure: patience. Alpha Legionnaires were trained to wait, to hold positions without recognition, to sabotage missions they had once helped plan, to abandon comrades if the equation demanded it. Loyalty was not to individuals, nor even to outcomes, but to process. The mission mattered. The truth did not. This made them unsettling allies even before the heresy. Other legions found them difficult to fight beside. They withheld information. They altered plans without warning. They treated allies as assets rather than brothers. And yet, they were effective. Too effective. When victories arrived without explanation, when wars ended before they could be properly recorded, unease followed. The Imperium thrives on symbols, on visible strength and recorded triumphs. The Alpha Legion offered none of these. Only results. And silence. That silence bred suspicion. It is no coincidence that when the galaxy fractured, when trust dissolved and the heresy ignited, the Alpha Legion slipped so easily into the role of traitor. To the Imperium, betrayal requires clarity, a clean break, a declaration. The Alpha Legion offered ambiguity. They fought Loyalists, but not always to win. They sabotaged traitors, but never openly. Entire battles hinged on Alpha Legion interference that benefited both sides, or neither. And always, there was the Hydra. Cut one head away, two more emerged. Warbands shattered, only to reappear decades later under different banners, fighting different enemies, serving causes that contradicted their past actions. Some bore chaos markings. Some did not. Some wielded demons. Some hunted them. And the Legion did nothing to clarify which were real. This fragmentation was not decay. It was evolution. By the time the Imperium realized the Alpha Legion could not be destroyed through conventional means, it was already too late. You cannot wipe out an enemy that refuses to exist as a single entity. You cannot win a war against a philosophy that thrives on contradiction. Even within the Legion, certainty died. Did Alpharius command them still? Did Omegon? Were they alive at all? Or had the Legion become self-sustaining? A doctrine that no longer required master? Records conflict. Testimonies contradict. Some Alpha Legionnaires claim to serve a Primarch still guiding them from the shadows. Others insist the Primarchs are dead, their purpose fulfilled, their absence intentional. Both may be lies, or both may be true. That is the genius of the Hydra. Truth is optional. Belief is sufficient. Across the millennia, the Alpha Legion has endured not by conquering territory, but by surviving relevance. Every age creates new fractures to exploit. Every regime produces new lies to weaponize. As long as systems exist, the Alpha Legion has something to corrupt. They do not need victory. They need continuation. And so the Imperium fights ghosts. Wars begin with no enemy and end with no explanation. Inquisitors purge worlds that were already lost. Loyal chapters clash with foes who retreat the moment they achieve some unseen objective. Somewhere a ledger is updated. Somewhere a variable is adjusted. Somewhere the Hydra watches. The Alpha Legion is not dangerous because it betrays. It is dangerous because it adapts, because it accepts damnation as a tool, because it understands that history is written by survivors, and survivors rarely ask the right questions. And above all, because it learned the most important lesson of war long before the galaxy burned. You do not need to rule the battlefield. If you can rule the story, the shadow remains, unbroken, unfinished, waiting. Chapter 3. Alpharius was never one. The truth fractures at the moment it is spoken. Alpharius was found last, or first. Records disagree. The contradiction is fitting. From the beginning, the pre-march of the Alpha Legion existed as a paradox the Imperium never resolved. Where other primarchs were singular forces, burning suns around which their legions orbited, Alpharius was a reflection, a shape that changed depending on who observed it. Tall, short, identical to his sons, indistinguishable from them. Even the Emperor, it is said, did not announce his discovery with ceremony. No parades, no proclamations. Alpharius was brought quietly into the fold, trained in secrecy, shaped not as a symbol, but as a contingency. And then there was Omegon, the twin, the echo, the other half of the lie. Whether they were born together or separated by fate is unknown. Some claim Omegon was hidden deliberately, raised apart, watching the Imperium from the shadows, while Alpharius stood in the light. Others insist the two were never truly separate, that Alpharius was a role shared between them, a mantle passed back and forth, until even they could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. What matters is this. The Alpha Legion was never led by a single will. It was guided by duality, where Alpharius favored visibility, appearing at the head of operations, allowing himself to be seen. Omegon preferred absence, where one engaged directly, the other observed, adjusted, corrected. Plans ran in parallel, intersecting only when necessary. If one died, the other continued. If both fell, the Legion would not notice. This was not weakness. It was redundancy elevated to myth. Alpharius taught his sons that primarchs are liabilities. Symbols invite focus. Focus invites decapitation. So he made himself replaceable. He encouraged his legion to mirror him, to erase the distinction between commander and soldier. When an Alpha Legionnaire said, "I am Alpharius," it was not deception. It was doctrine. During the Great Crusade, this philosophy allowed the Legion to operate beyond the Emperor's direct gaze. They were trusted precisely because they were unknowable. They solved problems that could not be addressed openly. They destabilized worlds that resisted compliance without creating martyrs. They cleaned wounds that could not be shown. But the heresy changed everything. When Horus fell to chaos, when the galaxy tore itself apart, Alpharius and Omegon faced a decision unlike any other pre-march. Loyalty, in its traditional sense, was no longer sufficient. The war would not be won through strength alone. It would be decided by outcomes. And so the Alpha Legion listened. Not to Horus, not to the Emperor, but to the future. Some accounts claim they were shown a vision, a branching of timelines where every choice led to extinction. Humanity annihilated by chaos if Horus won. Humanity rotting into endless war if Horus lost. The only survivable path was compromise, balance, a lie sustained forever. If chaos could never fully win, it would starve. If the Imperium could never truly triumph, it would endure. The Alpha Legion chose that path. Or perhaps they were chosen. From that moment, the Legion ceased to be loyal in any conventional sense. They fought for outcomes, not banners. They betrayed allies to preserve the larger design. They aided enemies to ensure worse futures never came to pass. Alpharius was killed, so the records say. Slain by Rogel Dorn, struck down in open combat. A rare moment of clarity in a war defined by confusion. And yet, some Alpha Legion war bands insist Alpharius still lives. Others insist Omegon died in his place. Others claim both primarchs are dead, and that this was always intended. A legion without a master is harder to predict, harder to manipulate. More dangerous. The truth may be simpler, or far worse. Perhaps the Alpha Legion no longer needs Alpharius. His lessons survived him. His philosophy embedded itself so deeply into the Legion's structure that removing the pre-march changed nothing. Orders still flow. Plans still unfold. Wars still bend in unseen ways. A Hydra does not mourn a lost head. It adapts. In the millennia since the heresy, sightings of Alpharius have continued. Commanders report facing him in battle, only for the body to vanish, the identity disproven, the certainty undone. Sometimes multiple Alphariuses appear across different war zones simultaneously. Impossible, unless the idea was the point. If the enemy cannot be certain their greatest victory was real, then they can never truly rest. Doubt corrodes faster than any virus. It weakens resolve. It fractures unity. This was always the Alpha Legion's true weapon. Not secrecy, not deception, but uncertainty. Even now, Imperial scholars argue whether the Alpha Legion is broken, corrupted, or secretly loyal. Chaos warlords debate whether they are trustworthy allies or manipulators steering them toward defeat. No consensus is ever reached. The Hydra remains. Alpharius may be dead. Omegon may be dead. Or they may be watching still. It does not matter, because the Alpha Legion no longer follows a pre-march. It follows a lie so perfectly constructed that even the truth cannot kill it. And in the end, that lie may be the only thing keeping the galaxy from tearing itself apart completely, or the final knife in its spine. Silence holds the answer. Chapter 4. The War You Never Saw. The first casualty is never a soldier. It is certainty. By the time the Alpha Legion fires a bolter, the war is already old. Decisions have been made in rooms that no longer exist. Orders have been given by men who were dead when they spoke them. Fleets are moving toward objectives chosen for them by hands they will never see. This is how the Alpha Legion wages war. Not on battlefields, but in time, where other legions measured victory in kilometers gained and enemies slain. The Alpha Legion measured it in probabilities, likelihoods, future states of collapse. A campaign was successful not when the enemy was destroyed, but when the next war had already been decided in advance. Their warriors were trained not just as soldiers, but as architects of consequence. An Alpha Legion operation rarely began with violence. It began with infiltration so subtle it was indistinguishable from coincidence. A logistics clerk reassigned. A Vox relay malfunction blamed on aging equipment. A noble house quietly disgraced through forged documents that were only mostly false. Each act insignificant alone, together catastrophic. They learned early that power structures are fragile. Remove the right support, and the entire edifice collapses under its own weight. No siege required. No heroics. Just patience. When violence was necessary, it was precise and humiliating. The Alpha Legion favored decapitation strikes, but not the kind that made martyrs. They killed commanders in ways that suggested incompetence or betrayal. A bridge officer executed by his own men after falsified evidence surfaced. A planetary governor assassinated by a Loyalist bodyguard who never existed. A chapter master lured into battle on false intelligence, only to be isolated and overwhelmed by an enemy he thought already broken. The message was always the same. You were never in control. On the battlefield, their tactics mirrored this philosophy. Alpha Legion forces rarely fought as massed formations. Instead, they operated in dispersed cells, appearing where they were least expected and vanishing before retaliation could be organized. They used enemy uniforms, enemy codes, enemy doctrines. Entire regiments have fought Alpha Legionnaires believing them to be allies, until the moment it was too late to change course. Hydra cells embedded themselves within Imperial Guard units for years, even decades. They fought alongside them, led with them, earned trust. Then, at the critical moment, they redirected a single order, delayed a reinforcement, misrouted an evacuation. A city fell, a world burned, and no one knew why. Against chaos, the methods were no less cruel. Alpha Legion warbands sabotaged ritual sites moments before ascension, not to save the world, but to redirect the summoning elsewhere. They allowed demonic incursions to succeed if it meant drawing greater threats into traps prepared centuries earlier. They fed Chaos Warlords victories, poisoned with long-term failure. A crusade wins a sector, only to fracture internally years later. A demon prince ascends, only to be bound by conditions he never understood. The Alpha Legion does not deny chaos. It manages it. This is why they are hated by both sides. The Imperium cannot forgive their betrayals. Chaos cannot trust their victories. And the Alpha Legion accepts both outcomes without complaint. Their warriors are conditioned for this existence. From induction, they are taught that they will be despised, that their successes will be attributed to others, their failures magnified, their motives forever questioned. They are trained to accept anonymity not as a burden, but as armor. To be unseen is to be invulnerable. Even their casualties reflect this doctrine. Alpha Legion dead are rarely recovered. Gene seed extraction is conducted only when it serves a purpose. Bodies are destroyed, erased, replaced. The enemy is never allowed proof of success. You cannot confirm a kill if you cannot confirm the identity. And identity in the Alpha Legion is fluid. Armor markings shift between campaigns. Heraldry changes subtly. Names are recycled. Even the Hydra sigil appears and disappears, depending on what message needs to be sent. Sometimes they want to be feared. Sometimes they want to be forgotten. Often both. This adaptability is not chaos. It is control refined beyond comprehension. Each Alpha Legionnaire is trained to operate autonomously, but never independently. They act on principles, not orders. On outcomes, not objectives. If a mission fails, but the larger design advances, it is considered success. If a victory threatens the balance, it is quietly undone. This is the war you never see. No banners, no last stands, no heroes, only consequences. And this is why the Alpha Legion is so dangerous, not because it can win battles, but because it decides which battles matter. Entire crusades have been rendered irrelevant by Alpha Legion interference. Massive deployments reduced to footnotes because the real war was already settled elsewhere. The Imperium marches proudly into wars that were lost before the first ship translated into real space. Sometimes the Alpha Legion fights openly when deception has reached its limit. In those moments, they are terrifying, perfectly drilled, cold, efficient. A legion that knows exactly how its enemy thinks, because it helped write their doctrine. But even then, open battle is a last resort, because once you see the Hydra clearly, it has already moved on. The war you remember is never the war that mattered. That is the Alpha Legion's greatest victory, and its most damning crime. Silence follows, as it always does. The Hydra coils again. Chapter 5. Loyalty is a weapon. Loyalty is supposed to be simple. A banner. A throne. A name spoken with certainty. The Alpha Legion shattered that simplicity and reforged it into something lethal. To them, loyalty was never a destination. It was a tool, sharpened, discarded, reclaimed when useful. They learned what others refused to accept. That blind devotion is predictable, and predictability is weakness. True power lies in choosing when to obey, and when obedience must look like betrayal. During the heresy, while other legions burned with conviction, the Alpha Legion fractured itself across every front. Some fought openly beside Horus, their Hydra sigils marked with the runes of the War Master. Others sabotaged traitor fleets from within. Others still fed Loyalist forces intelligence that arrived just late enough to feel like failure, just early enough to feel intentional. No side could claim them. No side could trust them. This was not indecision. It was design. The Alpha Legion understood something that even Primarchs struggled to accept. Wars are not won by loyalty to ideals, but by loyalty to outcomes. The Imperium did not need heroes. It needed to survive. Chaos did not need honesty. It needed momentum, and momentum could be steered. So the Alpha Legion became the axis upon which the war quietly turned. Not at Terra, not at Istvan, but in 1,000 unseen moments, supply convoys redirected, reinforcements delayed, cult uprisings triggered or suppressed, depending on what the future required. Sometimes they saved worlds. Sometimes they doomed them deliberately. The difference was never moral. It was mathematical. And Alpha Legionnaires trained to accept this burden early, from indoctrination onward. They are taught that they may be ordered to kill allies, to die for causes they will never understand, to live as villains so that others may continue believing in heroes. They are not asked to believe in righteousness. They are asked to endure damnation. This is why interrogation fails against them. Truth means nothing when the mission does not require it. Alpha Legion prisoners have confessed to heresy they never committed. Others have died insisting on loyalty, so convincing that inquisitors later questioned their own verdicts. Even now, centuries later, Imperial archives remain polluted with Alpha Legion disinformation. Some of it intentional, some of it collateral. The result is the same. No clean narrative survives. And perhaps that is the point, because the Imperium is not strong. It is rigid. The Alpha Legion saw this flaw early, saw that a system built on dogma cannot adapt quickly enough to a changing galaxy. Chaos evolves. Xenos adapt. The Imperium clings to tradition, like a corpse clutching scripture. So the Alpha Legion adapted for it. They turned loyalty into a flexible thing, a mask worn when useful, removed when necessary, reapplied later, unchanged. This is why some Alpha Legion warbands fight like true traitors, embracing chaos, wielding demons, drowning worlds in blood. They must exist. They must be convincing. Without them, the lie collapses. Other warbands act as unseen custodians, destroying cults, assassinating chaos champions, sabotaging black crusades from within. They never announce themselves. They never expect thanks. Both serve the same design, and neither can prove it. This duality has driven the Imperium mad. Inquisitors have spent lifetimes hunting Alpha Legion cells only to discover, too late, that the cell they destroyed had been preventing something worse. Others have unknowingly relied on Alpha Legion intelligence to win decisive victories, then purge the source afterward in horror. The Alpha Legion does not resent this. Resentment implies ego. Ego is a vulnerability. Instead, they persist, because loyalty, in its purest form, is not obedience. It is sacrifice, and no legion has sacrificed more. Not reputation, not honor, but certainty itself. To be Alpha Legion is to live without absolution, to accept that no revelation will come to justify your actions. No final accounting will declare you right. History will not remember you kindly, if it remembers you at all. And yet the Legion endures. Hydra cells still activate across the galaxy. Sleeper agents awaken generations after implantation. Wars end abruptly, without explanation, their causes buried beneath layers of contradiction. The Imperium survives another century. Chaos is denied a final victory, and no one knows why. That is the price of this loyalty. A loyalty that cannot be trusted, cannot be proven, cannot be redeemed, only used. In the end, the Alpha Legion does not ask whether it is loyal. It asks only one question. Does humanity still exist when the dust settles? If the answer is yes, then the lie was worth it. If the answer is no, then nothing ever mattered anyway. Silence follows. The Hydra waits. Chapter 6. The Imperium's Greatest Fear. The Imperium fears rebellion. It always has. Open revolt is visible. It can be named, hunted, crushed beneath orbital fire and righteous fury. The Imperium understands this kind of war. It was built for it, trained for it, sanctified by it. But there is another kind of enemy, one that wears Imperial colors, speaks Imperial truth, dies screaming the Emperor's name. That enemy terrifies them. The Alpha Legion does not stand outside the Imperium. It lives inside it, buried in data vaults, woven into command chains, sleeping beneath hive cities that have never known rebellion. It does not knock at the gate. It has always had the keys. This is why the Inquisition hunts them with such desperation and such uncertainty. To declare war on the Alpha Legion is to declare war on doubt itself. Every purge risks killing loyal servants. Every mercy risks letting a Hydra head survive. Every accusation fractures trust just a little further. And the Alpha Legion knows this. They exploit the Imperium's greatest weakness, paranoia without clarity. Entire sectors have been destabilized not by Alpha Legion attacks, but by Imperial responses to suspected Alpha Legion presence. Governors overthrown, regiments executed, chapters censured, worlds burned because someone whispered the word Hydra in the wrong chamber. The Legion rarely needs to act. Fear does the work for them. Inquisitors obsess over patterns, symbols, phrasing, tactical anomalies, desperate to impose order on chaos. The Alpha Legion feeds them just enough truth to keep them guessing. A real cell here, a false one there. Evidence that contradicts itself perfectly. Soon, the hunters begin hunting each other. The Alpha Legion has turned the Imperium's surveillance state into a liability. A system built on absolute certainty cannot survive ambiguity. Every sealed order, every redacted report, every classified operation becomes a potential Alpha Legion artifact. And so trust erodes. Chapter masters hesitate before committing forces. Segmentum commands delay reinforcements while authenticity is verified. Orders are questioned. Authority fractures. Not because the Alpha Legion commanded it, but because the Imperium assumed they did. This is the Legion's most elegant victory. They do not need armies when institutions devour themselves. Even Space Marine chapters are not immune. The Alpha Legion understands Astartes' psychology intimately. Their pride, their certainty, their reverence for chain of command. They know how to provoke suspicion without proof. A forged astropathic message. A supply shortfall blamed on sabotage. A campaign that fails just slightly too cleanly. Soon, brother chapters question one another. Accusations follow. Weapons are raised. The Imperium bleeds. And the Alpha Legion watches. Some Inquisitors have come dangerously close to understanding this truth. That the Legion's power does not lie in infiltration alone, but in forcing the Imperium to betray itself. To act against its own principles in the name of security. Those Inquisitors rarely live long, not because the Alpha Legion kills them, though sometimes it does, but because their insights threaten the fragile illusion of control. The Imperium cannot afford to accept that its systems are inherently vulnerable, that its obsession with purity creates the very fractures its enemies exploit. So the truth is buried. Again, the Alpha Legion has become a myth the Imperium cannot escape. Every unexplained failure is attributed to them. Every contradiction laid at their feet. They are blamed for disasters they never caused, and credited with victories they never sought. And this, too, serves the Hydra, because when everything is Alpha Legion, nothing is. They have achieved something no other Traitor Legion ever managed. They have become indistinguishable from the Imperium's own shadow, a reflection of its paranoia, a mirror held up to its fear of corruption. The Imperium hates the Alpha Legion not because it is strong, but because it is right. Right about the fragility of centralized power. Right about the dangers of blind loyalty. Right about how easily truth can be bent into a weapon. And worst of all, right that the Imperium cannot destroy them without destroying itself. So the war continues. Inquisitors hunt ghosts. Chapters guard secrets. Governors burn worlds to prove loyalty. And somewhere unseen, a Hydra head turns. Not in triumph, in patience. Silence closes around the thought. Chapter 7, Traitors to Chaos. Chaos believes in excess, in revelation, in the stripping away of masks until only raw truth remains, screaming, bleeding, worshipping. This is why Chaos can never truly trust the Alpha Legion. Where the gods demand devotion, the Hydra offers utility. Where Chaos thrives on passion, the Alpha Legion operates on restraint. They do not fall to madness easily. They do not surrender themselves fully. Even when they kneel, there is calculation in the posture, and Chaos senses this. During the Long War, countless Alpha Legion warbands entered the Eye of Terror. They fought beside the Traitor Legions. They bled in the same wars. They took the same spoils. Some even accepted demonic gifts, mutations crawling beneath ceramite, whispers gnawing at the edges of thought. But they never surrendered command. Other traitors became slaves to their patrons. The Alpha Legion studied theirs. They learned the language of the warp without letting it consume them. They mapped demonic hierarchies. They cataloged weaknesses. They recorded which rituals succeeded and which always failed. Knowledge harvested from damnation, not surrendered to it. This made them useful and dangerous. Chaos warlords valued Alpha Legion support. Their operations ran cleaner. Their enemies fell faster. Campaigns unfolded with uncanny precision. Entire sectors collapsed under pressures that seemed guided. But victories came with a cost. Rituals sabotaged at the final moment. Summonings twisted just enough to bind rather than free. Crusades that succeeded tactically, but collapsed strategically years later. Empires built on Alpha Legion aid that rotted from the inside out. Chaos gained ground, but never enough. The gods noticed. Sench, architect of change, saw patterns where there should have been none. Plans within plans, but always closing back on themselves. Nurgle felt stagnation where decay should have bloomed fully. Khorne raged at wars denied their final, glorious annihilation. Even Slaanesh recoiled from restraint so absolute bordered on denial. The Alpha Legion was not feeding the gods. It was starving them. Some Chaos Lords learned too late. They realized their victories were hollow, that every Alpha Legion success came paired with long-term containment. Rebellions that burned bright and then died. Demon worlds that failed to spread their influence. Warp storms that collapsed inexplicably. Those who confronted the Alpha Legion rarely survived. Not because of retaliation, but because the truth broke them. To learn that your apotheosis was permitted only because it served someone else's design is a wound deeper than death. To realize your god's favor was being managed is heresy even within heresy. And so Chaos turned on the Hydra. Alpha Legion warbands were betrayed mid-campaign, ambushed by supposed allies, offered up as sacrifices to prove devotion. Entire cells vanished into the warp, erased not by Imperial might, but by the very forces they had manipulated. The Legion adapted, as it always does. Some warbands withdrew from Chaos entirely, operating in real space as ghost legions, neither Imperial nor demonic. Others leaned deeper into corruption, becoming the perfect mask, convincing traitors whose devotion was so complete it deflected suspicion. A lie must be lived to survive, and so the Alpha Legion became traitors to traitors. They sabotaged Black Crusades not from loyalty to the Imperium, but from hostility to finality. Chaos seeks the end. The Alpha Legion seeks continuation. Endless war, endless tension, endless balance on the knife edge of annihilation. If Chaos wins, the game ends. If the Imperium wins, stagnation ossifies into extinction. Only conflict sustains the equation. This is why the gods hate the Alpha Legion. They cannot predict it. They cannot fully corrupt it. They cannot destroy it without damaging their own designs. The Hydra is not part of the great game. It disrupts it. And yet, Chaos still uses them. Because even gods grow desperate. Even gods need tools. And the Alpha Legion remains the sharpest blade that never admits whose hand it serves. In the warp, there are whispers that the gods fear Alpharius more than they admit. That Omegon walks paths even demons cannot follow. That somewhere in the Imperium exists a design so vast, so recursive, that even Sench cannot see its end. Whether these whispers are truth or Alpha Legion fabrication is irrelevant. They spread, they destabilize, they work, and so the Alpha Legion continues, hated by the Imperium, distrusted by chaos, hunted by both, owned by neither. A legion that stands alone in a galaxy defined by allegiance. A legion that understands the final heresy is not treason, but certainty. Silence settles where devotion should have been. The gods rage. The Hydra waits. Chapter 8. The cells that never die. The Alpha Legion does not retreat. It dissolves. When other legions are broken, they shatter. Leaders slain. Command chains severed. Survivors fleeing into irrelevance. The Alpha Legion was built for a different kind of survival. It assumes failure. It plans for erasure. Every campaign is designed with its own death already written into it. And so when a cell is discovered, when an Inquisitor finally pulls the thread and the Hydra head is cut away, nothing ends. It spreads. Alpha Legion cells are not units. They are infections. Self-contained, purpose-built, and disposable. Each one carries only what it needs to complete its task. No grand vision, no full map of the war. Just a fragment of a greater design, encoded into doctrine, trigger phrases, and conditional orders that may activate years or centuries later. Destroying a cell proves nothing. It only confirms that the timing was correct. Across the Imperium, there are worlds that have never known peace, not because they are constantly at war, but because they are constantly almost at war. Border disputes that never resolve. Rebellions that ignite and collapse before they can be understood. Trade routes that shift just enough to starve one system while enriching another. These are not accidents. They are the residue of Alpha Legion presence long after the Legion itself has vanished. Some cells embed themselves within Imperial institutions so deeply that removal would collapse the structure entirely. Administratum clerks whose records quietly redirect resources. Astropathic choirs conditioned to introduce subtle distortions into long-range communication. Ecclesiarchal figures who preach interpretations of doctrine that breed quiet dissent rather than open heresy. None of them know the full truth. Many do not even know they serve the Alpha Legion at all. Activation does not come as a command. It comes as a moment, a contradiction, a pressure point, a choice presented as necessity. The cell responds because it has been trained to recognize when a lie must be maintained, and when it is finished, the cell erases itself. Members die in unrelated incidents. Records contradict themselves. Evidence points everywhere and nowhere. Even the Alpha Legionnaires involved may not survive, or may not remember. This is how the Legion avoids stagnation. Cells are not preserved. They are spent, replaced by new ones seeded from the aftermath of old wars. Survivors recruited from broken regiments. Children taken from worlds that never made the news. The Hydra does not grow by accumulation. It grows by renewal. This cellular doctrine is why the Alpha Legion has no true homeworld, no central fortress, no singular rallying point. A legion that could be besieged would eventually fall. A legion that exists everywhere and nowhere cannot be exterminated. Even within the Eye of Terror, Alpha Legion warbands operate as cells, isolated, competing, sometimes openly hostile to one another. This is not schism. It is insulation. No single corruption can spread far enough to rot the whole. If one cell falls fully to chaos, it is allowed to burn. If another remains loyal, by some definition, it is allowed to endure. The Legion does not correct divergence unless it threatens the balance. Because balance, not purity, is the objective. Imperial tacticians have tried to adapt. Countercell doctrines, layered verification, purity checks that border on insanity. But every new safeguard creates new seams to exploit. The Alpha Legion thrives on complexity. It feeds on systems that believe themselves secure. The more the Imperium tightens control, the more opportunities the Hydra finds. And then there are the sleepers. Alpha Legionnaires placed so deeply that they never act at all. They live entire lives as loyal servants, die unremarkable deaths. Their only purpose is to exist, unchallenged proof that infiltration is possible anywhere. Their presence alone destabilizes certainty, for if one existed, how many others still do? This is the true immortality of the Alpha Legion. Not gene seed, not primarchs, but doctrine. A way of thinking that spreads without permission. A philosophy that survives even when its origin is forgotten. Long after a cell is gone, its effects remain. Decisions made under manipulated assumptions. Policies built on poisoned data. Wars fought for reasons no one remembers clearly. The Alpha Legion does not need to win. It only needs to ensure that no one else ever truly does. And so the cells persist. Born in silence, end in silence. No monuments mark their work. No names record their sacrifice. Only the slow, grinding uncertainty that seeps into everything they touch. The Imperium calls this corruption. Chaos calls it heresy. The Alpha Legion calls it maintenance. The Hydra does not sleep. It waits. Chapter 9. The Lie That Saves. The Imperium believes salvation must be visible. A pre-march returning in glory. A crusade crowned in banners. A miracle witnessed by billions. The Alpha Legion understands a harsher truth. If salvation is seen, it can be targeted. If it is named, it can be corrupted. If it is celebrated, it will fail. So they hide it. Across 10,000 years of war, there are moments the Imperium cannot explain. Catastrophes that almost happened. Apocalypses that stalled without reason. Black crusades that collapsed not in defeat, but in confusion. Leaders dead, supply lines broken, momentum evaporated. These moments do not appear in Imperial scripture. They are buried in redacted footnotes, contradictory reports, sealed vaults that no one is allowed to reconcile. But they exist. A demon incursion that never reached critical mass because the cult's prophet died weeks before ascension, murdered by an unknown assailant wearing Loyalist armor. A Tyranid splinter fleet that altered course after receiving false astropathic signals, signals traced to a relay station that had been abandoned for centuries. A sector-wide rebellion that dissolved overnight when its leaders turned on each other over evidence that was later proven forged. Each event saved lives, millions, sometimes billions, and each carried the same signature absence. No credit, no herald, no explanation. The Alpha Legion does not announce its rescues. It cannot. To be seen saving the Imperium would unravel the lie that sustains their operations. If the Imperium ever truly believed the Alpha Legion loyal, it would attempt to control them, codify them, bind them to chains of command and doctrine, and then they would fail. So the Alpha Legion allows the Imperium to hate them, allows itself to be hunted, allows itself to be damned, because hatred is freedom. It keeps the Hydra moving. It prevents stagnation. It ensures no single authority can ever claim ownership of the Legion's purpose. Even Gilliman, returned and reshaping the Imperium, cannot grasp what he cannot clearly see. And that may be by design. Some among the Alpha Legion believe this role is eternal, that humanity can only survive in the shadow of lies. That truth is a luxury the galaxy can no longer afford. They see themselves as custodians of a broken future, maintaining equilibrium through unseen sacrifice. Others disagree. There are fractures within the Legion now deeper than at any point since the heresy. Cells that believe the lie has gone too far, that the Imperium has decayed beyond saving, that by prolonging its existence, the Alpha Legion has only ensured greater suffering. These cells do not turn to chaos. They turn against the design. Silent civil wars erupt within the Hydra. Operations sabotaged by other Alpha Legionnaires. Plans collapsing because someone else decided the future required a different outcome. Hydra heads devouring one another in the dark. No one can tell which side Alpharius, if he lives, would favor. Perhaps that uncertainty is mercy. Because the most dangerous question in the galaxy is no longer whether the Alpha Legion is loyal, but whether it is still right. For 10,000 years, the lie has worked. Humanity endures. The Imperium, though rotting, still stands. Chaos rages, but never claims total victory. But the cost is unimaginable. Endless war, perpetual ignorance, a civilization trapped in decay, kept alive not by hope, but by fear and inertia. Was this truly the only path, or merely the one the Alpha Legion chose? The lie that saves is also the lie that condemns. By preventing endings, the Legion has ensured there can be no rebirth, no catharsis, no final reckoning that might allow something better to rise from the ashes. The galaxy is frozen on the edge of extinction, balanced, bleeding, and the Alpha Legion holds the knife steady. Perhaps that is why silence follows every act of salvation, because even the Legion cannot be sure whether it is preserving humanity or quietly suffocating it. The Hydra does not celebrate its victories. It watches the future it has trapped itself into maintaining, and waits to see whether the lie can endure 1 millennium more. Silence thickens. Chapter 10, The Cost of Inevitability. It always ends the same way. Not with revelation, not with vindication, but with blood paid by those who will never know why. The Alpha Legion does not escape consequence. It absorbs it. Every lie they maintain demands sacrifice. Every future they avert requires another to be quietly murdered in its cradle. The Legion understands this arithmetic with brutal clarity. Survival is never free. It is purchased slowly, relentlessly, with lives spent in silence. Where other legions count their dead in honored rolls, the Alpha Legion erases theirs, not out of shame, but necessity. A martyr creates questions. Questions lead to truth. Truth ends the lie. And so the dead of the Alpha Legion vanish. Bodies incinerated. Gene seed destroyed or repurposed. Names recycled until identity itself loses meaning. A warrior dies, and another takes his place, wearing the same armor, speaking the same oaths, continuing the same mission as if nothing was lost. This is not cruelty. It is inevitability. The Legion has learned what the Imperium refuses to accept, that the galaxy does not reward righteousness. It rewards adaptation. Those who cling to purity fracture. Those who cling to hope are crushed. Only those willing to compromise their own souls persist. The Alpha Legion compromised everything. Over millennia, this has reshaped them. Not physically, though mutations exist, but philosophically. They no longer think in terms of victory or defeat. They think in gradients, delays, deflections, futures bent just enough to avoid collapse. This makes them dangerous even to themselves, because inevitability is a drug. When every action is justified by survival, restraint becomes optional. When extinction is always the alternative, atrocity becomes acceptable. The Alpha Legion walks this edge every moment of its existence, and sometimes it slips. There are worlds they destroyed that did not need to die. Cult uprisings that could have been contained without extermination. Wars prolonged because the Legion believed the pressure was necessary. Belief is the only faith they allow themselves, and belief can be wrong. Within the Legion, this truth is understood but never spoken aloud. To question the design openly would fracture the Hydra. Doubt must remain private, encoded into subtle divergences of method rather than open rebellion. Yet the cost accumulates. Alpha Legionnaires are not immune to memory, to guilt, to the quiet realization that they have become indistinguishable from the monsters they manipulate. They do not scream their anguish like the World Eaters. They do not drown it in sensation like the Emperor's children. They endure it. They bury it beneath doctrine and move on. Some eventually break. These are the ones who disappear entirely. Not killed, not betrayed, simply gone. Cells that cease responding. Operatives who never check in. Plans that quietly fail because someone chose not to pull the trigger. The Legion does not hunt them. That too is accepted. Because to enforce inevitability too rigidly is to become predictable, and predictability is death. So the Alpha Legion bleeds internally, quietly, endlessly, maintaining balance not just in the galaxy, but within itself. A war fought without banners, without witnesses, where the enemy is moral collapse, and the only weapon is discipline. The Imperium calls this treachery. Chaos calls it cowardice. The Alpha Legion calls it function. Yet even function erodes. 10,000 years of maintaining a lie has consequences no pre-March foresaw. The galaxy has changed. New powers rise. Old assumptions rot. The calculus that once preserved humanity may now be suffocating it. Some within the Legion have begun to see this. They see Guilliman's return not as salvation, but as a destabilizing variable, a symbol too powerful, a truth too visible. They see faith hardening into fanaticism beyond control. They see chaos adapting faster than before, learning to exploit the very balance the Legion enforces. And they ask a forbidden question. What if inevitability has expired? What if the future the Alpha Legion has been protecting no longer exists? There's no answer, only silence. Because to admit this would mean accepting that the Legion has not been saving humanity, but preserving a corpse in motion. A dead empire walking because no one has allowed it to fall. And if that is true, then the Alpha Legion is not the Imperium's shadow. It is its jailer. This is the true cost of inevitability. Not blood, not damnation, but stagnation. A galaxy locked into endless war because no one dares allow the story to end. The Alpha Legion feels this weight more keenly than any other force. They are not blind zealots. They are not mad prophets. They see the cage clearly. They built it, and now they cannot be sure whether to maintain it or shatter it. Somewhere in the darkness, plans are being rewritten, long-held doctrines adjusted, outcomes recalculated with unfamiliar variables. The Hydra stirs, not in aggression, but uncertainty. This is dangerous, because uncertainty is what the Alpha Legion inflicts on others. To feel it themselves is something new. The galaxy stands on a fault line. One more millennia of balance may doom it. One moment of collapse may destroy it. And the Alpha Legion must choose again, without certainty, without absolution, without guidance, as it always has. The Void does not care which future wins, but the Alpha Legion does, and that may be its final sin. Silence closes around the thought. The Hydra does not sleep. It waits. Chapter 11, when the Hydra turns inward. The most dangerous war is the one fought without enemies. No banners face one another. No declarations are made. No records survive. The Alpha Legion has entered that war. For 10,000 years, the Hydra looked outward, toward the Imperium, toward chaos, toward futures that needed to be broken before they could exist. Now, slowly, almost imperceptibly, its many heads have begun to turn inward, not in rage, not in schism, in calculation. There's no single fracture point, no moment where the Legion splits. That would be too clean, too visible. Instead, divergence creeps in like frost through iron, silent, inevitable, unnoticed until the structure fails. Some cells still cling to the original calculus. Survival through balance. Endless war as containment. The Imperium preserved as a necessary corpse, animated by fear and inertia, but alive enough to deny chaos its final victory. These Alpha Legionnaires see themselves as custodians of a doomed system, maintaining it not because it is good, but because the alternative is extinction. Others no longer agree. They see what the galaxy has become. A place where suffering is no longer a byproduct of survival, but its foundation. A civilization that no longer needs saving, because it no longer remembers what survival was meant to preserve. To them, the lie has expired, and lies, when they outlive their purpose, become poisons. These cells do not announce rebellion. They do not declare a new doctrine. They simply adjust. Missions fail in subtle ways. Crucial assassinations are delayed. Key figures survive where probability demanded death. Entire contingency plans unravel because someone chose restraint where inevitability once ruled. From the outside, nothing changes. From within, everything fractures. This is the Alpha Legion's most perilous state, not divided but unsure. And uncertainty, once internalized, is no longer a weapon, it is a wound. There are Alpha Legionnaires now who no longer believe humanity can be saved through control. They argue, silently, indirectly, that collapse may be necessary. That only by allowing the Imperium to finally break can something else rise in its place. Not chaos. Something unknown. Others see this as heresy more dangerous than any demon. To abandon the balance is to invite annihilation. To gamble on rebirth is to risk extinction. The Legion was not forged to hope. It was forged to prevent endings. And so the Hydra circles itself. Cells sabotage cells. Intelligence feeds are corrupted deliberately. Sleeper agents awaken only to discover their handlers have been erased by other Alpha Legionnaires. Operations vanish into silence, not because they succeeded, but because someone decided they should not exist. No one claims responsibility. No one can, because the Legion has no center left to hold. The Primarchs, dead, missing, or myth, do not intervene. Alpharius does not return to correct the course. Omegon does not emerge from shadow to enforce unity. If they ever existed as guiding hands, they are gone now. And perhaps they always intended this. Perhaps the final lesson of the Alpha Legion was never deception or infiltration, but autonomy taken to its ultimate extreme. A Legion capable of questioning even its own purpose. A weapon that could decide whether it should still exist. This is not decay. It is evolution. But evolution does not guarantee survival. Across the galaxy, consequences ripple. Plans that once aligned with eerie precision now collide. Two Alpha Legion operations intersect unknowingly, undermining each other. Chaos cults spared by one cell are annihilated by another. Imperial worlds preserved by unseen intervention are later destroyed by a different Hydra head operating on older logic. The result is noise, confusion, entropy. The Imperium attributes this to chance, chaos to betrayal. Neither understands the truth. The Alpha Legion is no longer executing a single design. It is arguing with itself through war. This internal conflict is colder than any civil war. No rage, no speeches, just incompatible futures quietly erasing one another. Alpha Legionnaires killing Alpha Legionnaires without knowing it, both believing they are acting to preserve humanity. Both may be right, both may be wrong, and the galaxy suffers for the ambiguity. Yet even now, even in this internal unraveling, the Legion remains terrifyingly effective, because disagreement does not weaken it, it makes it unpredictable again. The very instability threatening to destroy the Hydra also renews its most lethal trait. No one, not the Imperium, not Chaos, not even the Alpha Legion itself, can predict what comes next. That is power, and also damnation. There's a quiet fear spreading through some Alpha Legion cells. A realization that once the Legion abandons inevitability, it may never regain it. That the moment they accept the future is unknowable, they cease to be custodians and become gamblers. And gamblers lose. But others embrace this risk. They see stagnation as the true extinction, a slow suffocation mistaken for endurance. They believe the galaxy deserves the chance to fail honestly, rather than be preserved artificially in endless decay. This is the heresy that cannot be named, not against the Emperor, not against chaos, but against control itself. The Hydra trembles at the edge of its own design. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Alpha Legion faces a truth it cannot manipulate away. Some futures cannot be managed. Some endings must be allowed. Whether the Legion will fracture completely, redefine itself, or erase itself to prevent worse outcomes remains unknown. There is no prophecy here. No hidden plan revealed. Only silence. The kind that precedes collapse. or rebirth. The Hydra coils tighter, uncertain whether the next strike will be outward or into its own heart. Chapter 12. The Hydra's Silence. It does not end with revelation. It never could. The Alpha Legion does not conclude its story with a truth unveiled or a banner burned. There is no final confession. No moment where the galaxy looks upon the Hydra and understands what it was meant to be. There is only absence. Somewhere in the void, a plan reaches its final line. Somewhere else, a counterplan quietly nullifies it. No one notices. No one remembers. And that is how it ends. For 10,000 years, the Alpha Legion shaped the galaxy by refusing to let it collapse or heal. They denied chaos its victory not through faith, but through interference. They denied the Imperium its redemption not through malice, but through restraint. They kept the war alive because they believed the alternative was worse. Perhaps they were right. Perhaps they were catastrophically wrong. The final tragedy of the Alpha Legion is not that it became traitor or loyalist, monster or savior. It is that it became necessary. A force so embedded in the machinery of survival that removing it would shatter what remains. The Imperium hunts the Alpha Legion still, unaware that many of its continued existences, thin, fragile, decaying, were purchased by unseen hands it is sworn to destroy. Chaos curses the Hydra, never realizing how often it was spared annihilation by the very legion it despises. The galaxy survives, barely, and no one is grateful. The Alpha Legion fades not in defeat, but in diffusion. Cells go dark. Sleeper agents never awaken. Operations cancel themselves because no one remembers why they were needed. The Hydra does not die. It thins, stretching itself so wide across time and space that it becomes indistinguishable from background noise. A rumor, a contradiction, a question without an answer. Perhaps Alpharius is dead. Perhaps Omegon never existed. Perhaps they still walk among their sons, unseen, content to let the Legion outgrow them. It no longer matters, because the Alpha Legion has achieved its final, most terrible evolution. It has become self-erasing. A Legion that knows the most dangerous thing it can do now is continue. And so, quietly, it withdraws, not as an army, not as a faction, but as an idea that has finished its work. No final order is given, no signal transmitted, just a gradual cessation of interference. The galaxy will now learn whether it was ever strong enough to stand without the lie. Chaos presses harder. The Imperium fractures louder. Wars grow more desperate, more honest. No unseen hand adjusts the balance. No Hydra head turns the knife, just enough to delay catastrophe. For the first time in 10,000 years, the future is unguarded. If humanity survives what comes next, it will not be because of deception. If it dies, it will not be prevented by sacrifice hidden in shadow. The Alpha Legion has done what it was forged to do. It has carried the burden of inevitability until even it could no longer bear the weight. There will be no monuments to mark this moment, no record in the librarius, no inquisitorial decree acknowledging the absence. History will not note the day the Hydra went silent, because history never knew it was there. Only the void will remember, and the void does not speak. Somewhere, a final Alpha Legionnaire removes his helm. He does not look to the Emperor. He does not pray to the gods. He does not ask for forgiveness or vindication. He simply stops. No orders, no mission, no lie left to maintain. The galaxy will burn or endure on its own terms now. The Hydra has released its grip, and in the sudden stillness, something far more terrifying than war takes shape. Truth. Whether the galaxy can survive, it is no longer the Alpha Legion's concern. The silence has been earned, and the void feeds on what remains.